Good evening, afternoon, whatever time it is when you end up watching this, or night. I have got my hot cup of tea, which is very good, actually. And I present to you Bathtub Boy. This is, of course, not officially named Bathtub Boy, dubbed Bathtub Boy by, I believe, John Gibson on his radio station because Keith Olbermann here couldn't deal with basically the Clinton impeachment and the Clinton stuff and refused to do his job as I think he was anchoring at the time. And John Gibson's got this whole story of how basically he was beside himself and he wouldn't leave the bathroom. So John Gibson just assumed he was, in the bathtub. But if as I say, you've probably heard of Keith Olbermann, but do you remember Keith Olbermann? If you're my age, you probably do, maybe. If you're older than me, you probably do. Pretty much, I would say probably 60 and below. I don't know how popular he was with people who were older at the time when he was on MSNBC. But he had a show. If you're younger, you probably don't know who the hell this guy is, and you're like, what is this? What is this very strange man with the shirt and tie and the hairstyle from like a Lincoln commercial? Well, Keith Olbermann, I believe he was a sports journalist originally, and then he transitioned into political anchoring / journalism, whatever you want to call it, because it's all the same nowadays, on NBC. He eventually got the show, it was post 9/11, it was a show called The Countdown with Keith Olbermann. And he seemed to have somewhat of a sense of humor, and he would just do like a list of things that he would talk about. I believe it was like top 10 or something, and then it would always go, he would end the show with, the worst person in the world, and it was all dramatic, and it was tongue-in-cheek. It got ridiculous after a while. It got, well, let's just say Fox... Greg Gutfeld set him up a couple times to the point where he was biting on stuff that was not, like, because he would have people watch Fox so that he could take little clips out of context and then, like, declare that they're, somehow enemies of the state. Yeah, he took things too far even 10, 20 years ago. And I guess it would be 10 years, a little 10, 15 years ago at this point. And here's a good example. Greg Gutfeld, they were making jokes about the green room, and one of the guests said, Mr. O'Reilly doesn't like it when you get into his stash. And they all laughed, and it was really funny. And then they decided on the run of it to censor that, literally blip it so that you could tell they were saying Mr. O'Reilly, but it sounded like they almost had censored it. And they knew that Olbermann would bite on this. So he had his whole segment about it, about Greg Gutfeld and Fox News and the Greg Gutfeld show being, or I guess it was Red Eye at the time, being the worst thing in the world ever, just outraged because, it was somehow Bill O'Reilly's. Bill O'Reilly had no idea even that this had occurred, nor does he care. But it was that level of petty scrutiny to the point where he was very easily mockable. Saturday Night Live, they had Ben Affleck do him, and I would say that's the greatest parody of, well, at least of Keith Olbermann, but it might be one of the greatest parodies ever done for somebody who's a talking news head / political analysis / whatever you want to call Keith Olbermann. Until you look at modern Keith Olbermann, and he's actually gone farther off the rails than even what Ben Affleck was making fun of him doing. I believe it was Ben Affleck doing him. Olbermann is apparently, I'm saying allegedly, an insufferable prick to work with, and he got canned from MSNBC. He got canned from NBC Sports because nobody liked him. He wasn't allowed to really do the commentary. He was allowed to do the recap play-by-plays. But even the people at NBC Sports, who aren't exactly, right-wing people or anything, they knew this guy was insufferable. And then he was at GQ, and he did his rants, and they got more and more and more unhinged. And apparently he's not with GQ anymore, and he has his own web show, and I don't know. He's a pathetic, very, very pathetic guy. I don't know. He's probably one of the most hateful people I've ever seen on television, and you guys have seen Don Lemon. You guys have seen Lawrence O'Donnell. Keith's actually worse than those people. And I'm about to play a clip for you to just give you a taste of of Keith's mannerisms, his Shakespearean diatribes, where he just kind of says stuff and uses thesaurus.com a lot, and just how sad of a man Keith Olbermann is. And also, this is kind of where rhetoric's gone right now. So this is why essentially the Democrats hide this guy now, because he's an embarrassment to them and himself.
By understanding what might be a more awful truth still standing behind this demonic president. Our best case scenario, our brightest outcome on election day is a landslide so thorough and unequivocal that even Trump's enablers, the Republican Party, political whores, every one of them, will not go out onto the limb with him and try to overturn his election defeat in the courts or on the streets or with the military.
He's the left's version of a fire and brimstone televangelist who, like, the right is just embarrassed by. Like, yeah, okay, I'm glad you're voting for who we want you to vote for, but Obama's not the Antichrist. That type. Keith got to that level for the left, and that's why they hide him, because he's embarrassing. It is really, really rich for somebody like Keith Olbermann, who had a mental breakdown in 2016, 2017 when Trump won the election. For him to say that the Republicans are going to somehow resist if he loses by some overwhelming majority, that they're going to somehow not be able to resist in the streets or resist in the courts. It's almost like he's projecting. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. My eyes keep going off to the right. It's because that's where my monitoring program is, and I'm still not 100% sure how it works sometimes. So please forgive my distraction. But it's just unbelievably rich for him who has not accepted the results. He didn't accept the results of the 2000 election or the 2004 election. He was like, oh, Bush stole it, and so and the courts and all. He's not accepted Hillary Clinton's loss, and he's going to come out here and talk about how we have to defeat the Republicans so handily that they don't resist it. Sure, pal. All right, projection, yes. Pathetic, also yes.
It must be a win so overwhelming that they and these maggots who believe in fascism, the kind that Donald Trump has already brought to this country, scurry back into their holes, disbelieving.
Keith, the fact that you haven't been lined up against the wall and shot means we're not living in a fascist country, of which you describe. Trump supporters are not fascists. In fact, when you accuse them of being fascist, they tell you to screw off. Donald Trump is not a fascist. Does he have sometimes authoritarian tendencies? Yes. Does he sometimes say things that I don't like that are too authoritarian? Yes, he does. But his overall governing strategy has been basically to shrink the size of the federal government and look at the pandemic response as, good or bad. He gave a lot of the responsibilities directly to the states. He didn't institute nationwide sweeping demands or executive decrees or anything like that. He's quite literally the opposite of what Keith is describing. He has to, not only does Trump have to be a fascist, but his supporters also have to be openly fascist. Otherwise, Keith himself can't justify how nasty he is and how just god-awful of a human being he is. He has to make up the people he doesn't like on the political side of the aisle to be the worst human beings imaginable, so that he can live with himself. That's Keith's. That's just what he does.
And shocked, but like him, ultimately interested only in one thing: saving their own asses.
Saving us from what, Keith? From what? From what? So we're all out there, we're supporting Trump. We've, millions and millions and millions and millions of people, all Trump supporters. And you think that basically if Trump loses, that we abandon him to save our own ass. Why? Why? What are we saving our asses from, Keith? What does that even mean, right? I did like the part where he called, Republican enablers, whores, all of them. If he's talking about the politicians, yeah, that's not so bad. But it's, again, really rich coming from, a guy who, one, didn't accept the last election, two, who's a Democrat when the Democrats are running a dude with dementia and they're just pretending like nothing's wrong. And for him to call, especially with Kamala Harris on the ticket, for him to call anybody on the right a whore in a political context, that's pretty pathetic. You don't want to go down that road. Trump's Republican approval, which is 98 to 95%, depending on who you ask, is at the record highs that it is because he proved himself. When he entered office, he had some of the lowest Republican Party approval of anybody elected, whether they were a Democrat elected and for Democrat Party approval or Republican Party approval entering. I think he's at least the lowest approval rate when he entered in recent history. People were willing to give him a try. His approval rate bumped after his, inauguration speech and all that. But he entered office with the most skeptical of skeptical Republicans looking at him. He still has, never Trumpers who have gone rogue and whatnot, and they're no longer Republicans. You got the, the Lincoln Project and what's his name? Oh my God, the bald guy, Rick Wilson, right? You still got those types. I don't know what he means by like whoring for Trump. It's quite literally the opposite, because basically he had to completely earn all the support he has, and Biden didn't have to. He's got dementia, and they're just like, well, got to be blue no matter who. That's a whore. That's a political whore. People who are actually standing behind Trump because they like what he did and they like what he stands for, and whether they like his personality or not, that would be the opposite of political whoring. So he's projecting, but, it's Keith.
Our best case scenario is a defeated Trump having no alternative but to concede defeat. And yet, in your heart what would follow even that decisive and blessed moment. If Trump actually accepts losing, he will not even pause for breath before he immediately announces that he is seeking the presidency in 2024.
What? Is this... Excuse me. I'm coughing because my asthma kicks up when I laugh at something. And that's... Keith, where are you getting that idea? What little fairy whispered in your ear and gave you any sense of reality where that is a plausible scenario? Hillary Clinton didn't even come out to address her crowd the night she lost on Election Day, and she still claims that she won the election. They were still looking to run her this year, 2020. Luckily for the Democrat Party, I guess they, cooler heads realized that she's utterly toxic, and that would have basically guaranteed a Trump re-election. But what does he think? Does Trump want to lose another $1.5 billion by running in 2024? What is Keith talking about? It's the kind of thing Trump would tweet as a troll, and then people like him would have their heads explode. But Trump didn't have to fish this. He actually came up with this on his own. Man. What do you even say to that kind of insanity? You just laugh at it.
And therein lies the real terror of this time of the madman. What he revealed about America, and to the unprincipled scum who have been for decades merely pretending they are not racist, they are not homophobic, they are not anti-Semitic, they are not anti-democracy, they are not obsessed with violence and death, the shy haters. What he revealed is they will not go away just because Trump concedes an election. They have been authenticated by him. They have been...
He's talking about me. He's talking about Trump voters, because there is no possible way people could support Donald Trump for policy reasons. No. It's that they're defective. Deep down, we're secret, racist, sexist, homophobic, fascist, Nazi, lizard people, or whatever he wants to call us. That's actually his base, right? Yeah, there are some people out there who believe that, but just so you know, you look like Keith when you say stuff like that. This isn't a good look, guys. This isn't bring unity back to the country. This is incredibly stupid. I don't think Keith Olbermann has ever talked to somebody right of maybe like Chairman Mao or Stalin. I'm sure he comes off more of a well, that's the thing. He'll shill for whoever the Democrats are putting up, whether it's a neolib or a socialist. He just wants to be the righteous mouthpiece of the party, right? So he doesn't care that much. But that's such an elitist ivory tower generalization of like who the average Trump voter is, like who are the people who actually put Trump in power. The guy's in orbit right now, and let's just say, if you're an independent and you hear this guy and you think, okay, I want to vote the opposite of whoever he wants because I want to give people like him the least amount of power as possible, right? The right didn't come out and say, oh yeah, so the Satan worshipers and the anti-American XYZ, whatever, they came out in force and they're the ones who put Barack Obama in office. I'm sure you can find one goofball, but nobody quite like the way he is, This is how you lose middle America, Keith. This is why you got your show canceled, because you can't even hide not only how arrogant and pretentious you are, but also because this is such an embarrassment to the Democrats. I'm sure plenty of Democrats maybe do feel the way Keith feels, but you put this out there like the way he's doing. The middle is just they're going to like turn on you immediately. They're going to say, "What are you talking about? I didn't vote last election. My brother voted for Trump. Are you saying he's a secret racist?" It's ridiculous. It fits perfectly into the the Antifa narrative, but this is the kind of thing that like you would expect in like a dystopian movie, or like Dr. Breen talking about like on the screen in Half-Life 2, and you're going through the city. And that actor passed away, unfortunately. But, like, there's, like, the propaganda, and, like, there's somebody staring at the screen talking down to you about how, we're doing this for the good of humanity. And those that are opposing it are just coming out, like it's the same exact tone. It's the same exact tactic of just completely, basically, propping your own ego up if you're in his camp because, you're just righteous because of what you believe. And then at the same time also saying that the other side, don't worry about what we do to them. They're just hateful Nazi evil people who now must be stopped, right? So that's pretty par for the course for Keith. But if this is new to you, it's just that this happens to be like an extra level of unhinged. He usually had I should say, to this point right here, this is kind of about where he was at when he got canned by NBC, and he kind of has started to fade into the distance. But in this video, it actually gets worse somehow.
Been told that their failures are somebody else's fault. They have been reassured that their worthlessness is the result of enemy A or enemy B or enemy C. They have been. So. And I kind of want to just keep playing it because it's quite entertaining in its own right, the way he strings this crap together. But for him to say that Trump's base is blaming enemy A, enemy B, enemy C, Keith, this is literally what Keith does. Is that basically he has his own character failures. He has his own shows being sunk by the fact that he's just an insufferable jerk to work with, to the point where the left can't even stand him. And he's blaming secret Nazis, secret racists, secret homophobes, Donald Trump, Donald Trump's enablers, and he's going to go on in a little bit to list a bunch of people. It's like he doesn't hear himself talking, Keith, maybe the reason you're miserable, Keith, is because you're Keith Olbermann.
and you're just an insufferable person with a really nasty attitude. Maybe that's why you're miserable. Maybe that's why you fail when you do fail. I don't know who's still paying him for his opinions. I mean, he made good money at MSNBC, so I don't think the guy's destitute or anything. But like, you know, he's not on top of the world anymore, and he pretty much blames everybody else, I guess. Enemy A, B, and C. It's just really rich to hear him say that when that's literally what he's doing. So,
given 5 years in the sunlight, and they are a blight that will be with us for generations. There can be no mistaking what is ahead of us in this best of possible scenarios, a period in which a Trump-led minority will continue to terrorize this country. And Trump, whose only barely human delight comes from the applause of the morons in the crowd, will...
Keith, who's out there burning the cities down right now, Keith? Who is it? Is that the Trump people? That Trump people? They've been burning down cities for 4 years? Is that what you've been saying? What is he talking about? You're not a terrorist because of your actions. No, not for Keith. No. You're a terrorist because you went to a Trump rally and you cheered on somebody Keith doesn't like. You're a terrorist because in your heart, you're a defective moron. And, okay, you might say, well, is that you're really reading into it? I'll allow him to continue and confirm what I'm saying.
Will seek that pleasure again and endlessly until the day he dies. We unleashed this terrorism via the activating mechanism of reality television. Trump unleashed his terrorists via the activating mechanism of encouraging them to hate. Trump.
Has anyone seen who's watching this Neil Breen's movies? Double Down. What was the second one? I don't remember. Pass Through. Fateful Findings. This reminds me of the way Neil Breen would always have like lectures in the middle of his thing where he would just like talk off and rattle stuff and complain about reality TV. There's just one scene in Pass Through where like he somehow like vaporizes everybody at like a news studio, but it's like really crappy green screen, and he sits there and he's giving a lecture and he's talking like this, and reality television and this, and he just starts like going on in the way he does it. I thought that was funny and crazy. This is actually somehow a little more unhinged. So, Keith, who created reality television? Was it the right? You the right create reality television, Keith? Who's running New York City and Hollywood right now? Is that the right, Keith? Is that the evil secret Nazis who created Trump from who nobody ever accused of being a racist literally until he ran for president? Like he just has to just. It's the level of cope this guy has for people like Keith created the Trump phenomenon, and he just can't deal with it. He just can't handle it.
Trump can be and must be expunged. Ooh. The hate he has triggered, the Pandora's box he has opened, they will not be so easily destroyed. So let us brace ourselves. The task is twofold. The terrorist Trump must be defeated, must be destroyed, must be devoured at the ballot box. And then he and his enablers and his supporters and his collaborators and the Mike Lees and the William Barrs and the Sean Hannitys and the Mike Pences and the Rudy Giulianis and the Kyle Rittenhouses and the Amy Coney Barretts must be prosecuted and convicted and removed from our society while
Keith, you're sounding a little bit like, what's the word? A Nazi. I'm going to play that little section again. I want you to realize the people he's listed off. Not just the specific names, which are in no way even necessarily connected to each other. He talks about the supporters. He talks about enablers. He wants us prosecuted, convicted, and removed from society. Okay, Keith, you want to throw 60 million Americans at minimum in jail for voting for Donald Trump? You want to do that? That's actually, I mean, that's what he's saying here. And put this in the context of all this stuff he said up front here. This is actually what he's saying. This isn't like, oh, he's being, you're taking him out of context. He's being hyperbolic. No. He actually hates us so much because we won't remake the world in his own in a manner that he wishes, that he'll go out of his way to say we need to be prosecuted for disagreeing with him, convicted for making him uncomfortable, because he's called Donald Trump a terrorist, which is, weird, but okay, and removed from society. So we either all go to the gulag and away from the society, or he means what it sounds like. What he's saying is basically we're just hunted down and not emboldened anymore. Subjugated, killed. That's what he's talking about. This would make Goebbels blush. Goebbels is like, yo, dude, tone it down just a little bit. You're kind of giving away the game. He would be such. Let me put it this way: if China were to invade the United States, right, and we were to lose like half the country, and then like the Chinese were occupying it, this is exactly what they would have their puppets basically coming out and saying. Like they would get Keith, and he probably would just give this exact speech and be like, "Yeah, you're the good people, but you got to get rid of the bad people. Need to be expunged." That's Keith. So let's hear it. Let's hear it again from him.
Collaborators and the Mike Lees and the William Barrs and the Sean Hannitys and the Mike Pences and the Rudy Giulianis and the Kyle Rittenhouses and the Amy Coney Barretts must be prosecuted and convicted and removed from our society while we try to rebuild it. And
again, what is the crime here, Keith? What is the crime? Did we fabricate FISA warrants and stuff to fabricate information and hire foreign spies to come up with stuff to try to delegitimize an election? Is that what we did, Keith? Are we out there burning cities down, Keith? What is he talking about? We know what he's talking about. It's because he actually hates us. Not even just a matter of disagreeing. It's hatred. Again, this is the kind of guy. Don't give him power because he tells you exactly what he plans to do. I think somebody should rewrite Mein Kampf from Keith Olbermann's perspective and just like change some of the stuff around. That's pretty much where he's at right now.
And to rebuild the world Trump has nearly destroyed by turning it over to a virus. Remember
what I said about him basically sounding like he's Chinese propaganda? I would be. I think what's funny if Keith didn't have this legacy of being this insufferable whack job that going back to basically the late 90s, I guess mid 90s. If he didn't have a legacy to go with, and he was just suddenly popping up like saying this kind of stuff, I would probably be like, this guy sounds like a Communist Party plant. That's what he sounds like. He sounds like Chinese propaganda, like he's some sort of double agent or some sort of, globalist guy who thinks he's, doing wonders by putting this message out. He basically sounds like Chinese propaganda. Trump unleashed this virus upon the world. Okay, Keith. Okay.
Remember it. Even as we dream of a return to reality and safety and the country for which our forefathers died, that the fight is not just to win an election, but to win it by enough to chase, at least for a moment, Trump and the maggots off the stage, and then try to clean up what they left. Remember it, even though to remember it means remembering that the fight does not end November 3rd, but in many ways will only begin that day.
Yeah. Don't give this guy power. Don't give people like him power, and don't give the people who he is supporting power. Because he's dead serious here. He's dead serious. He felt that he had turned the country against Bush when basically Obama won the election. He felt that he was the Pied Piper or whatever, the leader, the person who helped, the orator who helped turn an election and turn the country from evil George Bush to the Saint Obama. And then he warned about Trump and the nation didn't listen, and now he's coming back, and he's shocked. There just were so many racists and fascists and Nazis, he couldn't deal with it, and now he has to come back and expunge them, remove them from society, clean up the maggots. Keith, you want to call us maggots, okay, but we're very well armed maggots, and you're not just going to be able to push us off the stage, especially if we win elections, and especially with whatever you're talking about. We're not going to stay silent and stop talking just because, the person we didn't like won an election. It doesn't mean we don't, we're going to throw a coup or something, but it's kind of ridiculous considering Keith Olbermann, he claims that there's almost like he's being oppressed. And it's like, Keith, you've said whatever you want, this seditious, ridiculous stuff. That, I mean, this is the kind of violent rhetoric where if somebody on the right had said something just similar, they'd be canceled completely. Their YouTube channel would be broken down. Their Twitter account would be deleted. It would be all over the news and be like, look how crazy these Trump supporters are. But because Keith does it, and the left holds the institutions of power, he's fine. He just can get this message out there. If Trump was a dictator, Keith, you would be the first person lined up against the wall and shot, and guess what? Probably the left wouldn't even care. And he just cannot stand that he is not important enough to for all this attention that he used to he used to get when he was on MSNBC. He's just not important enough anymore. The left doesn't want him. The right is winning elections, and he's just so butt mad about it. This is the kind of stuff he's going into. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons I really don't want Biden to win. It's not even just a matter of policy, but it's like I really don't want to embolden somebody like him. The right, the people I was afraid of emboldening was back in 2016 was the alt-right, right? Because the alt-right came out and they pretty much raised all kinds of hell. They were very confusing because there was plenty of people who said they were alt-right who really weren't alt-right. And I think it was just because it was alternative, because it's kind of this, there wasn't really a name for this kind of Trump phenomenon where it was like libertarians teaming up with Republicans, with all kinds of, and some of those people, like early Trump supporter adopters, like some of them were like real assholes. They turned off people like me because they were just obnoxious. And that, that led to the chaos. But like, I was really afraid of the Richard Spencers and stuff, thinking that, okay, well, the Democrats lost an election, like basically the SJWs lost an election, so then they think they're going to actually assert themselves. Well, it turns out not only did they not get emboldened, they actually, disintegrated. I mean, you've got Richard Spencer endorsing Joe Biden now. It's not really that surprising if you look at Biden's record, especially from the 60s and after that. But it didn't pan out that way. On the left here, though, you've got Antifa, you've got basically the violent elements of BLM. I'm talking about the organizational level stuff. I'm talking about the people who show up and actually cause problems, not people who just think Black Lives Matter because they're too stupid to do some research, basically. I know. Keith's calling people stupid, I'm calling them stupid. But let's be honest here, right? Black Lives Matter, the organization, absolute disaster, evil, Marxist junk. And because they have a slogan that you like, just like hope and change, you will excuse anything that they do because you believe Black Lives Matter. Okay. Nobody doesn't believe Black Lives Matter. We just know what the hell that slogan means to the left, so we don't use it. But whatever, right? But Keith here and those type of people who want to remove us from society, we don't want to remove black people from society. We don't want to remove Democrats from society. We don't even want to remove communists from our society. I don't like them. I'd like them to be mocked handily. I'd like them to be thrown in jail when they throw firebombs. But I'm not saying what he's saying here. And that alone should be reason enough not to give the Democrats power right now. Here, this. Do you want to look at this guy for the next 4 years? As he just is like, we must continue to crush the mythical Trump enemy that will take, they've been emboldened for 5 years, and now he's suggesting it'll be 20 years before, we get rid of them. Like, do we want this guy to be like the inquisitor for the left? You know, because that's what we're looking at right now. This is insane. This is insane. And you can say, oh, most people on the left don't believe this. No, you're right. Probably most people don't. But also most people on the left are probably unaware of this level of unhingedness. Most people on the left are unaware that Antifa is actually an organization. Most people on the left are unaware of basically the things BLM had on their website for their goals, like, destruction of the nuclear family and Marxism and all this other stuff. A lot of people on the left just don't know, because they see something happy and they say, oh, Trump's a mean guy, and I think he's a racist because Keith Olbermann told me he was a racist, or whoever it is, Don Lemon, whoever they get their little snippets and headlines from. But this is the dude, like, these are the people who are being active. Like, these are the people who are going to be seizing power and agitating. It's this very angry, very sad person. So I'm more sure than ever when I see this that I'm going to be basically voting for the president, because you see something like this and it's just like, yeah, he deserves to have his reality rejected completely. Because if for some reason Biden wins, he's going to be insufferable. Could you imagine Keith Olbermann after a Biden win? What it would like having people like him out there? I mean, forget the genocide stuff, just the drama. But if you actually were to, defeat the left in the election, and Trump were to be reelected handily, the meltdown he would have, it would be. I mean, it was a great meltdown back in 2016 when Trump won, but the meltdown this time, I mean, come on, don't we want to see this? All right, if you're on the left, don't you want to see this guy just absolutely get vaporized? Like he just, his head would just explode. It would be amazing. It would be like that scene in Scanners, only like all the guts are coming out of his mouth as he just says insane things. If he really feels this way about that much of the country, like, maybe he should leave. I mean, he's in his little New York bubble, right? So, it's funny. I don't think he had ever even said the name Donald Trump until 2015 when Donald Trump started running. He had no problem with Donald Trump. It was just another New York Democrat who was one of the cool kids. But then the second Keith got kicked from the cool kid table for being a jackass, he had to find his new enemy. I got to prove to the Democrats that I'm still a useful voice because I hate Trump so much. Listen how much I hate. I'll say his supporters are secret Nazis and they've got to be expunged. Please like me. Please like me, Democratic establishment. I'm not going to embarrass you. That's Keith. That's Keith. It's just sad. Let's see. Oh no, he was done. Okay. Yeah. So that's Keith Olbermann. That's my little mini making fun of Keith Olbermann. And one of the reasons I have this special kind of, I would say disdain, but this raises my eyebrow, is not because I think Keith Olbermann is this massively influential person and this is some sort of major threat, but because when I was in high school, Keith Olbermann's show was probably at its biggest. Every day he would say, Bush needs to resign or whatever. Like he was way over the top. He hated the president. He hated everything. He just would just make stuff up, and like I had said at the beginning of this video. But when I was in high school, I had a history teacher who was influential on me. He taught me a lot of things, but I don't think he realizes what he actually taught me. I should say, I don't think I learned things that he wanted me to learn. I learned quite the opposite. He used to play clips from Keith Olbermann's Countdown show, like usually whatever Keith's ending monologue was, because he would just, get all indignant and act like he's from that, what was that movie, the news broadcaster or whatever, where the guy gives a speech and he's like, we are tired of this. Keith thinks he's like the hero in his own story, and he would give a speech at the end of every one of his shows that was basically him living out a fantasy, let's say. And my teacher would play us this clip, and then he would say, yeah, what do you guys think about this? Let's discuss. He wouldn't play anything from the right. In fact, he talked about framing and like what the concept of framing is. So I learned that from him, and then I realized his whole entire class is framed a specific way to the left, let's say. It took me a couple years to kind of process what was going on, but I used to have to basically deal with him in high school every it was at least once a week in class that this guy's face would end up on my on the TV screen in the classroom, and we would have to have a discussion about him. And it was like he was so forceful and so like this it's almost like you feel like when you're a kid, it's like an adult scolding you, and you don't have to like the adult, but like it's still kind of scary. That kind of atmosphere in the classroom, because this guy was just like would just go off and talk about how evil the right is and how evil XYZ is, whatever he's complaining about. There's plenty of things to complain about George Bush with George Bush, and Keith usually just had to resort to making stuff up, which is pretty sad. But whatever. I used to have to deal with him on a pretty much a weekly basis for, I guess that was at least a semester. And Keith. I'd like to say he hasn't changed, but it's not even that he hasn't changed. It's that he's morphed into even more of a parody of what he was back in the late aughts. It's just here he is, Keith. Here's what he's been reduced to, doing his internet show, whatever. I see, that's the thing. I don't even know. He used to do these like GQ things, but back when GQ went like full SJW, they brought him in to talk about things, and they put him in a fancy suit and like have a white background, and he would just lecture, and I was just like, wow, this is the opposite of punk rock here, But it's that's my personal vendetta against Keith Olbermann, because I used to have to listen to him all the time, and I just he made, let's say, he made an impression on me when I was younger, and it wasn't a good one. People like Keith have pushed me, or I should say, they've made me so forgiving of the boomerific cringe on the right, because at least I can point and say, at least we don't got this guy, At least we never gave Keith Olbermann a show to lecture people. Like that. He makes me so much more well-tempered, so much more less apocalyptic than, at least about the United States, I should say, than I guess I might be otherwise. I'd be feeling really bad with stuff going on, right? But I see Keith, I'm like, man, no matter how bad I think things are, I will never think things are as bad as Keith thinks they are. And I will never think I am so important, nearly as important as Keith seems to think he is. And it's, I don't know, 10 people might watch this video. Probably less, because I'm going on too long, right? But it's, I find it amusing. I hope you do too. If you're younger than me, yeah, go ahead. Look this guy up. Find his clips and stuff. The guy's out of his mind. Is anything he said here not true? I mean, they're bad arguments, but he doesn't actually present any facts or evidence or logic here. He just talks about how how evil the right is and how we must be.
The world Trump has nearly.
How we must be eliminated from society, and how Trump's almost ended the world. And I mean, this is like, again, this is fire and brimstone, but for like the Democrats, and it's embarrassing. It's I'm embarrassed as somebody, as an American, when I see somebody like this. I'm like, maybe ISIS had a point with the whole free speech thing. I'm not saying they've convinced me, but maybe they have a point when it comes, like, somebody like this comes out and it just starts saying this kind of stuff. I'm kidding, obviously. But like, he's the real life Neil Breen. Like, he's the hero in his own story, and only he knows the truth, and only he can rail against rail righteously against the evils of the world and the evils that he can see. And people don't just disagree with me. They have to be secret racists. They have to be evil coming out of the woodwork. Yeah, that's insane. Insane. But I think it's just narcissism, right? This guy is he's probably the most narcissistic person who's ever been on television. And that's saying a lot, because Lawrence O'Donnell is still on television. So is it O'Donnell or O'Donnell? I think it's O'Donnell. Lawrence O'Donnell. it's, Lawrence is funny in his own way because like he's not as articulate as Keith is, so he just starts his teeth get gritty and he just like starts like have his veins bulging, and then he just says a bunch of crap that's usually not accurate because he just feels that it's accurate. And Keith here though, he really really puts a lot of thought into these rants he does. I mean, he's got like the thesaurus app, and he's just like running through. And he's like, what can I, how bad can I paint whoever his enemy of the day is? Which I guess in this case are Trump supporters and Trump's enablers who need to go to Gulag or death camp or something. I don't know. Keith should move to China, and he should start working for the CCP and their news outlets. I'm not saying he has to shill for China. He can just be just as anti-American as he is on, our broadcast. He can say the same thing. But they would love him. I mean, he would be right at home with the CCP. Until, of course, he is so insufferable to work with or he gets himself in some scandal and then they execute him. But, I mean, everybody wins. Keith moves to China, whether he stays there and he lives a happy life, all the Chinese worship him, the CCP worships him because he's a hack. Awesome, right? But then if, it doesn't work out and he ends up making the Chinese very angry because he's embarrassing or, really tough to work with, and they get rid of him. He goes to the labor camp with the Tibetans, I don't know. I'm just saying. He moves to China, everybody wins. The Democrats don't have to be embarrassed by him anymore. Republicans don't have to even think about him in passing. China, I mean, come on. You guys got to, come on, this guy's an ex-major news personality. He gets to say all the things you want him to say, right? Or you wish the Americans were saying and voting. And then, doesn't work out. Keith gets to, he gets to be, again, the hero in his own story because the whole world has turned on Keith. Poor Keith. The whole world has turned on him, The Democrats turned their backs on him. And the Republicans, oh man, they don't just disagree with him. They're actually out there, marching to sabotage and terrorize him. I don't think Trump I'm kind of surprised, or I should say I'm not that surprised because he's actually he's not nearly in the limelight anymore. But like he would absolutely relish the a Trump tweet that was like directed at Keith Olbermann, like the fact that like Senpai noticed him. He would relish that so hard. But the only reason this is getting picked up is because basically he called for, basically the killing of Trump supporters. So the right-wing media picked it up like, hey, look how unhinged Keith's being, Keith Olbermann's being. But, like, the president isn't giving him attention. The president isn't saying, Keith, shut up. You're crazy. Like, he's so out of the relevant political quadrant. The Democrats, again, pretend he's not there. And the Republicans, like he has to say something this outrageous to even get like any kind of coverage whatsoever. It must just drive him absolutely insane that basically he's so not nearly as influential as he wants to be. Not just as he wants to be, as he believes he deserves to be. And man, what a jackass, right? What a jackass.